The city of New York never truly sleeps. The neon lights of Manhattan flickered through the windows of the Harris Group's penthouse, casting long shadows on the marble floor. In the clouds above the noise of the streets, there was a world of wealth, glass, and silence. And in that silence, Nora White had learned how to breathe quietly, almost invisibly. She had been married to Vincent Harris, one of America's youngest tech billionaires, for 3 years. 3 years of wearing the title Mrs. Harris like an exquisite diamond that glittered on the outside but cut her skin from within. 3 years of banquets, cameras flashing in her face, women whispering behind their manicured hands, and nights spent alone in the vast, cold guest bedroom while her husband slept in another wing of the penthouse. He never touched her, not once. They were the golden couple to the world, the brilliant billionaire and the graceful young woman from Atlanta who had lucked out by marrying into the Harris empire. But behind the high walls of their marriage, Nora lived with a truth so bitter that sometimes she wondered if she could swallow another day of it. Vincent Harris had never loved her. On a stormy night with rain streaking the glass walls of their 80th floor home, Nora sat on the edge of her bed, staring at her wrists. The pale skin there still bore faint scars, ghostly reminders of her last desperate act. She had cut them once, not to die, but to be seen, to make him look at her even just once, with something other than cold indifference. But when the household staff had called him panicked, saying, "Mr. Harris, your wife tried to hurt herself. She's bleeding. She needs you," Vincent's voice had cut through the phone, icy and merciless. "Is she dead?" "No, sir." "Then don't waste my time." Those words were knives sharper than the ones she had held against her skin. That night, as the city thundered outside, she realized that even her life meant nothing to the man she had married. He would not weep at her grave. He would not feel the weight of her absence. To him, she was nothing more than a name tied to a contract, a piece of paper bound two people in a farce called marriage. And yet, for reasons she couldn't explain, her heart still clenched when she heard his footsteps in the hallway, still leapt in secret when she caught a rare glimpse of him at the breakfast table. His white shirt perfectly pressed, his sharp jaw dusted with the faintest shadow of stubble. He was, and had always been, her unreachable dream. Nora remembered the first time she had seen Vincent Harris. She had been 18, a college freshman, studying chemistry and business, with dreams of creating safe, affordable skincare for women of color. He had been 26, then already making headlines as the Silicon Valley maverick, the man who had built a multi-billion-dollar empire before 30. He had been on the cover of Forbes, his eyes cold but magnetic, his smile a rare ghost that made the entire nation lean forward. For her, he had been a symbol of the life she wanted, powerful, untouchable, brilliant. She had taped his magazine cover above her dorm desk, telling her roommates, "One day, I'll build something like that. One day, I'll stand beside a man like him, not behind, but beside." She never imagined she would marry him. But life has a way of turning dreams into twisted realities. It wasn't the fairy tale she had once dreamed when she married him at 20. It was a rushed ceremony in Las Vegas, his hand barely brushing hers, his lips pressing against her cheek with the same formality he would use to sign a business deal. She had thought then, "It doesn't matter if he doesn't love me yet. One day he will. One day he'll see me." 3 years later, she was still waiting. "Mrs. Harris," the housekeeper's voice floated through the door one morning. "Breakfast is ready." Nora stood in front of the mirror, brushing her curls into place. She had long ago perfected the art of looking composed, even when her heart was in ruins. She slipped into a navy silk dress and joined her husband at the dining table. Vincent was already there, sipping his black coffee and scanning the morning financial reports on his tablet. His suit was flawless, his tie a deep gray, his cufflinks gleaming like tiny shields. He didn't look up when she entered. Good morning. She tried, her voice gentle. Silence. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for the orange juice. The butler hovered, unsure whether to serve her favorite blueberry pancakes, because last week Vincent had banned them from the menu, saying, "Stop indulging her whims." Every day was a battlefield where no swords clashed, but her dignity was cut down piece by piece. She sat across from him, the quiet between them thicker than the glass walls around them. And in that silence, she wondered again. What is more painful, to lose a man you love, or to live beside him while being invisible? It wasn't just the silence. It was her, Lila Carter. She was everything Nora wasn't. Blonde, elegant, born into wealth in Los Angeles, with a fashion label that glittered across Paris runways. She was Vincent's childhood friend, the one who had shared summers in Malibu with him, the one his mother adored, the one society whispered should have been Mrs. Harris. And whenever Lila appeared, Vincent's mask of indifference cracked enough to reveal something like familiarity, protection. For Nora, it was a knife twisted deeper each time she saw it. At one gala, Lila had leaned close to Vincent, her manicured fingers brushing his sleeve. "She doesn't really fit in here, does she?" Lila had murmured, eyes flicking to Nora, who stood alone by the champagne table. Vincent hadn't defended his wife. He hadn't even looked at her. That night, as the photographs of Vincent Harris and Lila Carter splashed across society blogs, Nora's face was nowhere to be seen. She was a ghost in her marriage, erased as though she didn't exist. On her 23rd birthday, Nora sat alone in the penthouse. Vincent hadn't called. He hadn't remembered. The rain fell again, just as the night she had once cut her wrist. She held the divorce papers in her hand, unsigned, but trembling with possibility. How long could a heart survive in the cage of silence? How long before love turned to ashes, and ashes turned to nothing? She whispered to the empty room, "Vincent, if I leave, will you even notice?" The only answer was the thunder outside. Their story began. This a woman unseen, a man untouchable, and a marriage hanging by threads invisible to the world, but cutting deeply into her soul. Every sigh, every stolen glance, every unanswered word between Vincent and Nora was a battlefield more devastating than any scandal could create. And yet, somewhere beneath the ice, there was fire. Vincent Harris was not a man easily moved, but what would happen if the woman he had dismissed, ignored, and silenced decided to walk away? Would he let her go? Or would the world finally see what happened when a billionaire who thought he felt nothing suddenly realized the only thing he couldn't live without was the wife who had just packed her suitcase? If you're here listening to Nora's story, you already know this isn't just another tale of wealth and betrayal. It's about the quiet wars we fight in our hearts, the silence that can suffocate louder than screams, and the moment a woman finds the courage to ask, "Am I worth more than this?" What do you think? If you were, Nora, would you have stayed and fought for his love, or walked away long ago? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to know your thoughts. And if you're as captivated as I am by this stormy marriage, make sure to like this video and follow the channel, because part 2 is coming soon. And trust me, the fire that's about to ignite between Vincent and Nora will burn brighter and more dangerously than you can imagine. The city lights glittered like diamonds, spilled across the velvet night, as black cars lined up in front of the Waldorf Astoria Hotel. Tonight, the grand ballroom belonged to the Harris Group. It was an annual gala, a celebration of the company's achievements. But more than that, it was a parade of power. Senators, tech moguls, designers, and journalists waited for one man to arrive. And besides that, a man was always supposed to stand by his wife. But Nora White had long since learned that supposed to and reality were often strangers in her marriage. When Vincent Harris stepped out of his car, Flashbulbs erupted like a storm of white fire. He was flawless in a black tailored tuxedo, his sharp jawline cut by the lights, his blue-gray eyes calm and unyielding. He raised a hand briefly to acknowledge the cameras, before turning and offering his arm, not to his wife, but to Lila Carter. The crowd gasped, then murmured, then cheered. Reporters shouted her name, eager to photograph the childhood companion of the billionaire. And Nora, emerging a moment later from a separate car, felt the world tilt. She was dressed in an elegant silver gown, the silk flowing like water against her skin, her curls pinned up to reveal the slender line of her neck. She had thought foolishly that tonight might be different, that for once Vincent would walk with her into the light. But he hadn't even turned to see her. His hand was on Lila's back, guiding her into the hotel, as if she were the woman by his side, as if Nora were nothing more than a distant guest. The chandeliers blazed above crystal fire, raining down upon gowns and jewels worth millions. The air was perfumed with roses and expensive champagne, but beneath it all was the intoxicating scent of ambition. Nora entered quietly, clutching her silver clutch like a lifeline. Heads turned, some with curiosity, some with disdain. She was always the anomaly to them, the girl from Atlanta, daughter of a nurse and a mechanic who had somehow become Mrs. Harris. But tonight, she was worse than an anomaly. She was invisible. Because at the center of the ballroom, all eyes were fixed on Vincent and Lila. Lila wore emerald green, her golden hair cascading like sunlight. She laughed softly at something Vincent whispered, touching his arm like she had every right. And he allowed it. He didn't flinch away. He didn't correct her. To the press, society, women, and board members, it looked as though Vincent Harris had already chosen his queen, and Nora White was nothing but a shadow. She made her way to the champagne table. Her smile composed, her shoulders straight. She had promised herself she wouldn't break tonight, not before them. But the whispers came sharp as knives. Poor thing, she doesn't even belong here. Vincent and Lila make such a perfect pair, don't they? Everyone knows he only married her out of obligation. She's temporary. Nora clenched her glass until her knuckles turned white. Each word was poison seeping into her fragile heart's cracks. She told herself she had survived worse, the nights alone, the indifference, the silence. But somehow this public stripping of her dignity cut deeper. She raised her chin, refusing to let them see her bleed. The orchestra swelled, and couples began to fill the marble floor. Nora watched as Vincent extended his hand, not to her, but to Lila. And the sight of them gliding together was more devastating than the silence of their marriage. Vincent, who had never once asked Nora to dance, and never brushed his hand across her waist in public, now held another woman, as though she belonged there. Her vision blurred. The silver gown felt like chains, the ballroom like a cage. Still she stayed. She watched. Because leaving would be surrender, she refused to give Lila that victory. Later that evening, she approached Vincent, her voice steady, though her heart thundered. "Vincent," she said quietly, "may I speak with you?" His eyes flicked to her, calm and unreadable. "What is it?" Before she could answer, Lila's laughter chimed beside him. "Oh, Nora," she said sweetly, though her eyes glittered with cruelty. "Don't tell me you're jealous. We're only old friends after all." Nora's lips parted, but Vincent cut in, not to defend her, not to correct Lila, but with a dismissive murmur. "Don't make a scene." The words were soft, but the weight of 1,000 humiliations lay in them. Please don't make a scene, as though she were the one tarnishing his reputation, as though she were the embarrassment. Something inside her snapped. She excused herself, walking quickly down the corridor until she found an empty powder room. The silence there was suffocating, broken only by her ragged breath. In the mirror, she saw a stranger, a woman dressed in silver, painted in jewels, but hollowed out by grief. Her eyes brimmed, but she refused to let the tears fall. Instead, she whispered to the reflection, "How much longer will you endure this? How much longer will you beg for scraps of love from a man who won't even claim you as his wife?" The woman in the mirror had no answer, only silence. Back in the ballroom, Vincent's gaze slid toward the space where Nora had stood. For a brief moment, something flickered in his chest, unease, but he pushed it aside, burying it beneath years of habit. He had married her because of responsibility and circumstances that had forced his hand. He told himself daily that he felt nothing, that Nora White was nothing more than a burden tied to his name. And yet, when he couldn't see her in the room, a strange restlessness gnawed at him. Lila's hand tightened on his arm. "Vincent, are you listening?" He nodded, but his eyes betrayed him, scanning the crowd as though searching for someone. When Nora finally returned her steps, measured her face composed, she carried herself like a queen, stepping into enemy territory. And for the first time that night, Vincent's gaze lingered on her. The silver gown shimmered under the lights, her dark skin glowing with a strength he had underestimated. She didn't look broken. She looked untouchable. And though he didn't understand why his chest tightened, the gala ended past midnight. Silence stretched between them like a chasm in the back of the limousine. Nora stared out at the rain-slick streets, the reflection of neon lights shimmering in her eyes. Vincent scrolled through his phone, unreadable. Finally, she spoke. "Do you enjoy humiliating me?" His thumb stilled. He lifted his gaze sharp. "What are you talking about?" Her laugh was bitter. "You walked in with her. You danced with her. You let them whisper about me as though I wasn't even your wife." His jaw tightened. "You're overreacting." "Overreacting?" She repeated, her voice trembling. "Vincent, I am your wife. Or does that mean nothing to you?" Something flickered in his eyes for a moment. Guilt, perhaps. But it was gone as quickly as it came. "Don't be dramatic," he muttered, returning to his phone. Nora turned away, pressing her palm to the cool glass. And in that moment, she realized something terrifying. It wasn't that he didn't love her. It was that he might never be capable of love at all. When they returned to the penthouse that night, Vincent went to his wing without a word. Nora stood in the empty living room, staring at the city sprawling below. She thought of the girl she once was, the one who had taped Vincent's magazine cover to her dorm wall and believed in fairy tales and destiny. That girl was gone. In her place stood a woman who had endured humiliation, loneliness, and silence. A woman who was beginning to understand that her worth could not be defined by Vincent Harris or his indifference or his shadowed heart. A small ember of resolve burned within her for the first time in years. She would not beg. She would not break. And perhaps she would no longer stay. The morning sun slid through the tall glass windows of the Harris penthouse, spilling gold across the white sheets. It should have been a gentle awakening that whispered of peace. But for Nora White, it was the first morning of a life she no longer recognized. She opened her eyes and blinked at the room around her: high ceilings, crystal chandeliers, silk curtains swaying in the breeze of New York. Everything was too sharp, too foreign. She sat up, clutching her temples as a dull ache spread through her skull. Her reflection in the mirror startled her. The woman staring back was older than she remembered, her cheeks sharper, her eyes deeper, her curls styled with precision. But inside, Nora felt like she was 18 again, a college girl on the brink of the future, ambitious, untamed, and unbroken. "Where am I?" she thought. And why do I feel like I've lost something precious? Doctors would later say it was temporary amnesia, triggered by emotional trauma. But in that moment, Nora only knew one thing. 5 years of her life had vanished from her memory. She remembered Atlanta, her dorm room, her dreams of building a skincare line for women like her. She remembered laughing with her friends, scribbling formulas in notebooks, imagining she might make her mark one day. But she remembered nothing of the years after. No wedding, no penthouse, no Vincent Harris. So when the bedroom door opened and he stepped inside, tall and immaculate, holding his phone as though it were part of his body, her breath caught. She knew his face. Everyone in America knew his face. Vincent Harris, the tech billionaire, the man on magazine covers. But why was he here in her room? "Who are you?" she whispered. Vincent's brow furrowed the faintest crack in his mask of composure. "What do you mean?" Nora clutched the sheets tighter, her voice shaking. "Why? Why are you in my room? Where am I?" He stepped closer, confusion sharpening his gaze. "You're in our home," he said slowly. "This is the Harris penthouse, and I am your husband." The word husband struck her like thunder. Her eyes widened. She shook her head, curls tumoring loose. "No, that's not possible. I don't remember marrying anyone." Something flickered across his expression. Irritation, then something darker, more challenging to name. For a man who controlled billion-dollar empires, her words had the power to shake him. For the following days, Nora struggled to reconcile the woman she saw in the mirror with the girl she felt inside. She walked through the penthouse as though it were a museum, each familiar and strange room. The grand piano by the window. Had she ever played it? The library of leather-bound books. Had she ever read them? The staff bowed to her, calling her Mrs. Harris, yet she felt no belonging in the title. And Vincent, he was the greatest mystery of all. He treated her with the same cold indifference, but beneath it, she noticed his eyes watching her more closely now, as though her amnesia unsettled him. As though he didn't quite know what to do with this version of her, a version who didn't beg for his attention, who didn't shrink under his silence. Because this Nora, stripped of 5 years of pain, was bold again, fearless again. The girl who once dreamed of conquering the world, not the woman who had learned to endure humiliation. It showed first at dinner. Vincent sat at the head of the long table, scrolling through his tablet, barely glancing at her. It was routine, the ritual of silence they had lived for years. But this time, Nora wasn't silent. "Do you always eat like this?" she asked suddenly, calm but edging with amusement. His head lifted, surprise flickering. "Like what?" "Like a statue. Like you're here, but not really. You don't even taste the food, do you? You sit, Red, drink your coffee, and vanish." The staff froze their eyes, darting nervously between the couple. No one had ever dared to speak to Vincent Harris that way, not even his wife. He set the tablet down slowly. "You seem different." "Maybe," Nora replied, spearing a piece of salmon with deliberate grace. "Or I've just woken up." Their gazes locked, sharp against sharp, fire against ice. For the first time in their marriage, Vincent was not the only one with power at the table. News of Nora's change spread quickly through the tight circles of high society. And it wasn't long before Lila Carter appeared again, radiant as ever, her emerald eyes filled with mischief. "Nora, darling," she cooed at a luncheon in Los Angeles. "You look different these days. Less quiet. Almost like you've grown a backbone." Nora smiled unshaken. "Or I just stopped pretending." Lila's lips tightened, but Vincent, standing nearby, said nothing. He watched instead, silent, his gaze unreadable, as the two women circled each other like predators. Later, Lila leaned close to him, whispering, where she knew Nora could hear, "She's not the same. Be careful, Vincent. A woman who forgets can also learn to leave." Nora caught the words. And though they burned, they also planted something fierce in her chest. Day by day, Nora tested her boundaries. She walked into Vincent's office without knocking, startling his executives. "Can I sit in? After all, it's our company too." She refused to wear the gowns Lila's designers sent her choosing instead. Bold colors, sharp cuts, clothes that declared she was no longer invisible. At charity dinners, she spoke her mind, challenging ideas, laughing too loudly, living too fully for the image of the silent wife she had once been. And Vincent's eyes followed everywhere she went. Cold, yes, but also curious, irritated, intrigued. He could command armies of investors, silence entire rooms with one glance. Yet he couldn't silence her anymore. One evening, he cornered her in the library. "What game are you playing, Nora?" His voice was low, dangerous. She looked up from the book she was reading, her smile calm. "I don't play games, Vincent. Not anymore." "You're not the same," he said, his jaw tight. "You used to—" He trailed off, catching himself. Used to what she pressed, rising to meet his gaze. "Beg for your love. Shrink every time you ignore me. That Nora doesn't exist anymore. I don't remember her. And maybe that's a blessing." His silence was thunderous. For the first time, Vincent Harris had no words. The days turned into weeks, and the balance between them shifted. Nora, once a ghost in her own home, now burned with life. She laughed again. She dreamed again. She dared again. And Vincent, cold, untouchable. Vincent began to falter. He found himself watching her across the room, unsettled by her glow. He remembered the feel of her hand in his, once the weight of her name on his tongue. He had thought he could ignore her forever. But this new Nora, fierce and unbroken, was impossible to ignore. One night, as she stood on the balcony, the wind lifting her curls, Vincent joined her. For a long moment they said nothing, the city pulsing below them. Finally, Nora spoke. "It's strange to forget 5 years, to lose them as though they never happened. But forgetting is freedom. It could be a chance to start again." He turned his gaze sharp. "And where does that leave me?" She looked at him, then truly at him, the man who had been her torment and dream. "I don't know," she said softly. "That depends on whether you want to be remembered." Her words struck deeper than any accusation. For the first time, Vincent felt the ground shift beneath his feet. In the weeks to come, an invisible war raged between them. Nora pushed forward, reclaiming her life, her dignity, her voice. Vincent went back, desperate to maintain the control he had always wielded. But the truth was undeniable. The woman he had dismissed, neglected, humiliated, she was no longer his to silence. And in his chest, a dangerous realization grew. He was beginning to fear losing her. The Harris penthouse glittered with wealth, but its walls echoed with silence beneath the shine. For weeks, Vincent and Nora had circled each other like two forces caught in the same storm, neither yielding, neither breaking. Nora had changed, and Vincent knew it. She was no longer the quiet, obedient woman who bore his indifference like a chain around her neck. This new Nora carried herself with fire in her veins, and for the first time, Vincent Harris found himself unable to control what he had once dismissed as insignificant. But in his world, change was dangerous, and in his marriage it was unacceptable. It began one evening when the city outside pulsed with neon lights and the hum of endless cars below. Vincent entered the dining room, his suit sharp, his expression colder than winter. Nora was already seated, her gown the color of midnight, her eyes steady as she raised her wine glass. He sat across from her, the table long enough to be a bridge between strangers. For a while silence reigned, broken only by the faint clink of silver against porcelain. But Nora had grown tired of silence. "Vincent," she said at last, calm but resolute, "why did you marry me?" His hand paused on the glass of bourbon. He didn't look at her. "We've been through this before." "No," she countered, leaning forward, her gaze unwavering. "You've avoided it before. Tonight, I want the truth." His eyes finally lifted to hers, gray-blue like steel. "Does it matter?" "It matters to me," she whispered, "because I don't remember saying yes. I don't remember choosing this." For a long moment he said nothing. The air between them was heavy taut. Then finally Vincent set his glass down with deliberate precision. "Las Vegas," he said flatly. Nora frowned. "What about it? That's where we married, a private ceremony. No family. No press. Just a judge and a contract." Her breath caught. Images flickered faintly in her mind. Bright lights, the glitter of casinos, the dizzying blur of alcohol. But they were fragments, not memories. Why, she pressed. Why me? Why then? His jaw tightened. "Because I had no choice." The words sliced deeper than a blade. Her hands trembled against the stem of her glass. No choice. Vincent leaned back, his gaze unreadable. "You were involved in an incident that could have destroyed my name, a scandal I couldn't afford. The only way to contain it was to marry you. Responsibility, Nora. That's all it was." She stared at him, her heart pounding her chest, hollowing out. She had imagined 100 reasons for their marriage fate, hidden affection, even family pressure. But this stripped her of every illusion. So she said softly, her voice breaking, "All I ever was to you was damage control." Vincent didn't answer. His silence was the loudest truth of all. The woman she had been, the one who endured humiliation, who clung to the hope of love, might have collapsed then. But the Nora who stood before him now, forged from pain and rebirth, refused to let him see her fall. She rose from her chair, her gown flowing like storm clouds. "Do you realize how cruel that is?" she demanded. "To bind someone to you, not out of love or respect, but out of necessity. Do you know what that does to a person's soul?" His eyes flickered, but his voice remained cold. "Better than letting you ruin both of us." Her laughter was sharp, bitter. "Better for you, Vincent. Always for you." She turned away, her heels striking the marble floor like thunder, each step an echo of her rage. That night, alone in her room, Nora pressed her forehead against the window pane, watching the rain fall over the city. Fragments of memory teased her, flashes of Las Vegas lights, the quick exchange of vows. His hand cool against hers as he slipped a ring on her finger. No tenderness, no joy, just formality. She closed her eyes, her chest aching. She had once believed in love fairy tales and the magic of choosing someone to pick you back. But her marriage had not been decided. It had been forced. And now she understood she had never stood a chance. Across the penthouse, Vincent poured himself another drink. He told himself it didn't matter, that Nora's feelings were irrelevant, that this marriage had always been a cage for them both. But the image of her eyes, dark with hurt, haunted him. The tremor in her voice when she asked, "Why me?" replayed in his mind like a wound that wouldn't close. For years, he had convinced himself he felt nothing for her. That indifference was safer than intimacy. That distance was easier than the risk of need. But tonight, for the first time, he wondered if he had lied to himself. The days that followed were filled with silence, sharper than words. Nora avoided him, her laughter gone, her defiance now edged with sorrow. Vincent watched her from the shadows, restless, unsettled. One evening, he found her staring at the fire in the library. "Do you hate me now?" he asked quietly. She didn't look at him. "I don't know if I hate you, Vincent, but I know I can't keep living like this." Her voice was calm but final. It was the voice of someone who had broken, and in breaking had discovered her own strength. Vincent stood there, torn between pride and something he refused to name. For years, he had believed he could control everything. Markets, empires, even people. But he couldn't control Nora's heart. And for the first time he realized he didn't want control. He wanted something far more dangerous. He wanted her. Once defined by silence and humiliation, their story now teetered on the edge of change. Nora, stripped of illusions, had found her voice. Vincent, stripped of indifference, had discovered his fear. But love born from ruin is fragile. And as the storm gathered above them, neither knew whether their marriage would collapse under the weight of truth or rise reborn from the ashes. The world outside gleamed with polished skyscrapers and flashing billboards, but inside the Harris penthouse, the air felt heavier than smoke. Nora sat at her vanity, staring at the reflection of a woman she barely recognized. Her curls fell like midnight around her shoulders, her skin radiant even beneath exhaustion. But her eyes, those once brimming with faith, were now sharp with clarity. She had posted the review 3 days ago, 3 days since her words shook the beauty world like a thunderclap. The truth she had written under the video was that her voice was steady, despite the tremor in her chest. This product contains mercury levels far beyond safe limits. It isn't luxury, it's poison. The video had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, thousands of comments. Consumers raged. Influencers echoed her findings. And the name attached to the scandal, Lila Monroe. Vincent's Lila. By morning, the headline screamed, "Billionaire's childhood friend, under fire for toxic products." Harris Capital's investments are tied to a scandal. Nora White. Harris exposes Monroe Cosmetics. And though the world applauded her courage, her home turned colder than ever. Vincent returned late that night, his face shadowed with fatigue, his gray-blue eyes stormier than she had ever seen. He dropped his jacket onto the sofa and fixed his gaze on her. "What did you do?" His voice was quiet, but beneath it simmered something dangerous. Nora lifted her chin. "I told the truth." "You humiliated her," he snapped. "What will this cost?" "Yes." Nora shot back, rising to her feet. "It will cost the lies their power. It will cost her the illusion of safety, while people suffer from her negligence." "Vincent, I did my job. I protected consumers." His jaw clenched. "You destroyed her." Her laugh was bitter. "And you care more about Lila Monroe than about me." The words hung in the air, heavy and unmovable. Vincent's eyes hardened, his silence confirming what he would not say. "I see it now," Nora whispered. "It's always her. Even when she's wrong, you shield her. Even when I'm right, you condemn me. She's not the villain you make her out to be." Vincent muttered, pacing to the window, his shoulders tense. "She's complicated." "Complicated." Nora's voice cracked. "Vincent, her brand is poisoning women, and you call that complicated. If I had looked the other way, how many faces would scar? How many lives would change forever?" He turned back, his eyes steel. "And if you destroy her, you destroy me too." Harris Capital is her largest investor. "You've jeopardized more than a friendship, Nora. You've jeopardized my empire." That night, Nora realized something that chilled her more than Vincent's coldness. She was utterly alone in this fight. The next day, Monroe Cosmetics released a statement. Glossy, rehearsed, dripping with denial. "Our products meet the highest international standards. We condemn defamatory claims." But Nora knew the truth. She had the lab reports. She had tested the samples herself. Mercury didn't lie. And yet heads turned when she walked into the Harris Capital offices later that week. Whispers trailed her like smoke. There she is, the wife who sabotaged her own husband. Maybe she just wanted attention. Even his executives no longer called her Mrs. Harris. To them, she was just Nora, stripped of her title and stripped of respect. Vincent held a press conference 2 days later. Cameras flashed. Reporters leaned forward, the world hungry for a statement from the young titan whose empire now stood on shaky ground. He stood tall at the podium, his silver tie immaculate, his voice firm. Harris Capital remains committed to our partners. Monroe Cosmetics has provided documentation that its products meet regulatory standards. We stand by our investments. The applause was polite. The headlines were swift. Vincent Harris defends Monroe Cosmetics. Billionaire dismisses wife's allegations. Nora watched from home, her heart a battlefield of rage and despair. So that was it. Her truth had been reduced to nothing more than defamatory claims, and Vincent had chosen his side. Not her. Never her. When he returned that night, she confronted him in the living room.
"You stood there and called me a liar,"
she said, her voice shaking. "I called you reckless," he corrected, loosening his tie. "There's a difference." "No, Vincent, there isn't." She stepped closer, tears burning her eyes. "You didn't defend me. All for her. You didn't hesitate to throw me under the bus." He turned sharply, his eyes flashing. "This isn't about her. It's about you never thinking before you act. You put emotion above reason. You put pride above strategy." Strategy. Nora laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call protecting her? Is that what you call protecting a company built on lies?" His silence was the answer she feared most. Days passed, and their penthouse became a war zone of silence and slammed doors. Nora buried herself in research, determined to prove what she knew in her bones. Vincent buried himself in work, meeting with lawyers, strategists, and Lila. Sometimes late at night, Nora would hear him on the phone. His voice softened in ways it never did for her. "Lila, don't worry. I'll handle it. No, you're not alone in this. I won't let it ruin you." Each word was a dagger. It was during one of these nights that Nora finally confronted Lila face to face. She had been at a gala, an event Vincent had conveniently forgotten to tell her about. Nora entered the ballroom in a sleek black gown, heads turning as whispers spread like wildfire. Across the room, she saw them, Vincent beside Lila, their figures bathed in golden light, as if they belonged to the same world. Lila's laughter was a melody, her hand brushing Vincent's arm as though it were natural. Nora approached her presence, slicing through the crowd. "Mrs. Harris." Lila greeted sweetly, her green eyes glinting. "I was telling Vincent how grateful I am for his support. True friendship is rare these days." Nora's smile was razor sharp. "Yes, especially when it comes at the cost of truth." Lila tilted her head, feigning innocence. "Truth? Oh, darling, you always were dramatic. I worry sometimes that your emotions cloud your judgment." Nora stepped closer, her voice low but firm. "And I worry that your ambition closes your eyes to conscience. But don't mistake my silence for surrender, Lila. I will not let you bury the truth." The tension was palpable. Vincent's hand tightened around his glass, but he said nothing. And in that silence, Nora heard everything. When they returned home, Nora no longer had the strength to argue. She walked past him, her heels echoing on marble, and locked her bedroom door. Vincent stood outside, his hand against the wood, his chest heavy with words he couldn't speak. He told himself it was for the company, for survival, for legacy. But deep down, he knew it was for Lila. And that truth scared him more than anything else. Nora, lying in bed, whispered into the darkness, "I can't do this anymore." Her heart ached, but it also hardened. If her husband could not stand with her truthfully, He would have to stand without her. The rain had not stopped for 3 days. New York's skyline was a blur of gray mist and flashing lights, as if the heavens were mourning. Inside the penthouse, Nora stood before her closet, pulling dresses from their hangers, folding them slowly into a single leather suitcase. Every movement was deliberate, steady, though her hands trembled faintly. She had cried enough. Tonight, there would be no tears. On the nightstand lay the papers, her escape, her declaration, her surrender, and her victory, all at once. The divorce papers bore her name in neat black ink, firm and unshaken. She endured his silence, indifference, and betrayals for 3 years. For 3 years, she had hoped that beneath Vincent Harris's icy mask, there was something that resembled love, but now she knew whatever lived inside him was not for her. The door opened behind her. Vincent entered his presence as commanding as ever, the faint scent of cedar and bourbon clinging to him. He saw the suitcase first, then the papers. His eyes narrowed. "What is this?" Nora didn't falter. She zipped the suitcase, and the sound was sharp in silence. "I'm leaving. You're not serious." His voice was quiet, controlled, but beneath it a storm brewed. She met his gaze, dark eyes unflinching. "I've never been more serious. I can't stay in a marriage that doesn't exist. Not anymore." He crossed the room, picking up the papers, scanning the bold letters. His jaw tightened. Divorce. Yes. For a moment, silence pressed between them. Then swiftly he tore the papers in half, the sound loud and violent. "You think you can walk away?" he demanded. "You're my wife." Her heart clenched, but she forced her voice steady. "No, Vincent. I was your prisoner. Now I'll be free." His eyes burned with something she had never seen before. Not indifference, not coldness, but desperation. "You don't get to decide this. I already have." He stepped closer, towering over her, his hand gripping her arm. "You belong here." She pulled free, her voice rising. "I don't belong anywhere I'm not wanted. And you've never wanted me." The words cut deeper than any blade. Vincent staggered back as if the truth had struck him. For once, the billionaire who commanded empires had no reply. She left before dawn, the city still wrapped in mist. A single taxi carried her away from the glass tower and the marble halls that had been her cage. As the car pulled into the airport, she pressed her forehead against the window, watching Manhattan fade behind her. She felt the faintest taste of freedom for the first time in years, bitter and sweet. Vincent did not follow, but his silence haunted her all the same. In the penthouse, Vincent stood before the torn papers scattered across the floor. His chest tightened with an unfamiliar ache, something raw and unbearable. He had always believed he could live without her. She was a duty, an obligation, a name tied to his empire. But the emptiness of the apartment without her footsteps, without her quiet presence, felt like suffocation. For the first time, Vincent Harris felt fear. Not to lose money, not of losing power, but of losing her. 2 weeks later, Nora found herself in Chicago, the city of winds and steel. It differed from New York, less polished, more alive, every corner humming with energy. And it was here she met Ethan Moore again. She had known of him before, a charismatic, sharp, and unapologetically ambitious young mogul in finance. Unlike Vincent, Ethan smiled easily. Unlike Vincent's, Ethan's gaze did not pass through her, but lingered steady and warm. When she walked into the headquarters of Moore Enterprises, Ethan rose from his chair, his hand extended. "Nora White," he said, his voice rich with admiration. "I've been waiting for this meeting." Ethan had followed the scandal, read her reports, and watched as she stood alone against Monroe Cosmetics. "You were brave," he told her, leaning back in his chair. "The industry needs voices like yours, women who don't bend. I'd like you to work with us. Please help us build something cleaner and better." His offer was more than professional. It was respect. It was a belief, something Vincent had never given her. For the first time, Nora felt the spark of possibility. "Thank you," she murmured. I'd like that." Yet even as she began to rebuild, Vincent's shadow lingered. His name trailed her in headlines. His presence haunted her dreams. Some nights she woke, the echo of his voice still in her ears, the ghost of his touch still on her skin. She hated herself for missing him. She hated him more for making her feel this way. In New York, Vincent grew restless. He buried himself in work, but no meeting, merger, or billion-dollar deal could silence the emptiness. He tried to convince himself it was pride that he wanted her back because no one walked away from Vincent Harris. But when he caught himself reaching for her empty chair at breakfast, when he woke in the middle of the night calling her name, he knew the truth. He wanted her. He needed her. And he was losing her. Weeks later, Vincent flew to Chicago on business. Or so he told himself. But when his car pulled up in front of Moore Enterprises, and he saw her walking out of the glass doors beside Ethan Moore, he felt his chest ignite with a fury he could not name. Nora looked radiant, confident, alive. Ethan's hand brushed her elbow as they spoke, his smile easy, his gaze protective. Vincent's fists clenched. He had let her go. He had pushed her away. And now, another man stood where he should have been. That evening, Nora returned to her apartment to find him waiting outside. "Vincent," she breathed, startled. "What are you doing here?" His eyes blazed. "Is he the reason you left?" She froze, anger rising. "I left because of you." His jaw tightened. "You're mine." Her laugh was sharp. "No, Vincent. I was yours. You lost me." He stepped forward, his voice low, rough with something he had never shown. "I won't let him have you." Her heart pounded, torn between fury and the dangerous thrill of his words. For the first time, Vincent Harris looked not like a man of ice, but a man on fire. And so it began, a dangerous dance of three hearts. Nora is struggling to rebuild her life and dignity. Ethan offering her a future of respect and possibility. Desperate and jealous, Vincent was fighting to reclaim what he had lost. Her choice now carried the weight of her past and the shadow of her future. And as the winds of Chicago howled outside her window, Nora knew one thing. Her story with Vincent Harris was far from over. Chicago's skyline glowed at dusk, the winds rushing through steel towers and over the river's dark surface. Nora stood near the glass window of her new apartment, her curls catching the last golden streaks of daylight. The city felt different here, raw, untamed, but alive in a way New York never had. Behind her, Ethan Moore placed 2 glasses of wine on the table. His smile was warm and steady, the kind of smile that invited trust without demand. "To new beginnings," he said. She touched her glass to his, her eyes softening. For the first time in years, she felt she could breathe. But across the city, in the shadows of a black limousine parked not far away, another pair of eyes watched with stormy intensity. Vincent Harris. Vincent had not meant to follow her. At least that's what he told himself when his private jet landed in Chicago again, when his driver took him past her apartment building. He had told his board it was business. He had told himself it was a coincidence. But it was a lie. The moment he saw her step out of the glass doors with Ethan Moore, laughing softly, her hand brushing against Ethan's sleeve, something inside him snapped. He sat in the back seat of his car, now staring up at the lights of her apartment. The thought of her smiling like that for another man clawed at him. She was his. She had always been his. And yet, she had walked away. When he finally confronted her, it was outside Moore Enterprises. Nora had just finished a long meeting. Her folder clutched against her chest when Vincent's shadow fell across her path. "Vincent," she gasped, halting. What are you? Is he the reason? His voice was low, sharp, and raw. The reason for what she asked, though she knew. The reason you left me. The reason you think you can live without me. Her chest tightened, but her voice stayed firm. I left because you never saw me, Vincent. Because you never loved me. Ethan has nothing to do with it. His hand shot out, grasping her wrist, not cruelly, but desperately. Please don't lie to me. I saw the way you looked at him. Her breath trembled. And when was the last time you noticed how you looked at me? The words silenced him. She pulled free, her heels clicking on the pavement as she walked away, leaving him standing alone at night, a man who suddenly realized that his indifference had cost him everything. That night, Vincent couldn't sleep. He sat in the penthouse suite of his Chicago hotel, a glass of bourbon untouched in his hand, staring out over the river. He remembered every detail, the way Nora's eyes once softened when she looked at him, the way her laughter filled the silence of the penthouse before he crushed it with his coldness. He remembered her voice the night she left. I was your prisoner. Now I'll be free. And now another man stood at her side. The thought was unbearable. Vincent Harris knew jealousy for the first time, not the sharp sting of competition he felt in business, but the raw, consuming fire of fear. Fear that he had lost the only woman who had ever mattered. Meanwhile, Nora poured herself into her new work with Ethan. Together, they began crafting a campaign for safer, cleaner products in the beauty industry. Her voice, once silenced, was now celebrated. Journalists called her brave. Consumers trusted her word. Ethan supported her as a partner and friend, offering encouragement where Vincent had once offered disdain. One evening, after a long day, Ethan found her standing on the balcony of his office, gazing out at the city. You're stronger than you think, Nora, he said softly. Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise. She smiled faintly, but his words stirred a painful truth in her heart. Strength didn't mean the absence of love. And no matter how much she tried, Vincent's shadow still lingered. It happened at a charity gala in Chicago. Nora had attended with Ethan, their presence drawing the eyes of society pages eager to speculate. She wore a crimson gown that night, bold and defiant, her skin glowing under chandeliers. Ethan stood beside her, dashing in his tailored suit, his hand occasionally brushing hers in subtle reassurance. But when they stepped into the ballroom, all conversation hushed, because across the room, Vincent Harris was waiting. He hadn't been invited yet. His power guaranteed him entry anywhere. His eyes found hers instantly, and the air seemed to vanish in that moment. Nora's chest tightened. Ethan leaned toward her. Do you want to leave? No, she whispered, lifting her chin. Not anymore. Vincent crossed the room with the grace of a predator. The crowd parted as though sensing the storm in his wake. Nora, he said, his voice softer than she expected, but no less dangerous. Vincent, she replied, steady, though her pulse thundered. Ethan's hand lingered on her back, but Vincent's eyes flicked to it with sharp fury. Careful, more. She's still my wife. Nora's breath caught. No, she said firmly. I stopped being your wife the day you chose Lila over me. The ballroom gasped, whispers exploding like wildfire. Vincent's jaw tightened, but his eyes betrayed something else. Pain, fear, longing. I made mistakes. He admitted hoarsely, the words foreign to him. But I won't lose you. Nora's eyes glistened, but she stood tall. You already did. After the gala, Vincent's jealousy consumed him. He hired private investigators, demanded reports on Nora's every movement, and even followed her car through the streets of Chicago. His empire remained intact, but once untouchable. His heart was unraveling thread by thread. One evening, Ethan confronted him outside Nora's apartment. You need to stop, Ethan said coldly. She deserves peace. Vincent's laugh was bitter. peace with you. Can you protect her from me? Ethan's eyes narrowed. No. She'll protect herself. You underestimate her. For the first time, Vincent realized the truth in those words. Nora no longer needed him, and that terrified him most of all. Days later, Vincent cornered Nora in a quiet cafe near the river. The world bustled outside, but inside, the air was tense with unspoken words. I can't stand it, he admitted suddenly, his voice breaking. Seeing you with him and thinking of you with anyone else. It's killing me. Nora's hands trembled around her cup, her eyes locking on his. And where was this when I was begging for your love, Vincent? Where was this when I was drowning in silence? His chest heaved. I didn't know then. I didn't let myself feel it. But I know now. Nora. He broke off the words choking in his throat. She shook her head, tears brimming. Please don't say it. Not when it's too late. He reached for her hand, but she pulled away, standing her voice trembling with both strength and sorrow. Love without trust. Vincent is just another prison. And I've already escaped once. As she left the cafe, leaving him behind, Vincent Harris, the man the world feared and who bent empires to his will, realized something devastating. He could lose her. Truly, irreparably, he could lose her. And for the first time he understood that all the power, all the wealth and walls he had built around his heart meant nothing if she was gone. The winds of Chicago howled through the glass panes of Nora's apartment, a chorus of whispers that mirrored the storm in her heart. She stood in the bathroom, her trembling fingers clutching the small white stick that bore two faint lines, two lines that would change everything. Her knees weakened. She sank against the cold tiled wall, breath, shallow heart racing. Pregnant. She was carrying Vincent Harris's child. She sat there in silence for long minutes, the truth pressing against her chest like an unbearable weight. She should have felt joy, new life, new possibility, but instead, she felt 1,000 conflicting emotions. Fear, anger, longing. She thought of Vincent, his cold eyes, his harsh words. She thought of the countless nights she had slept alone, begging silently for love he never gave. Could a man who had never cherished her truly cherish their child? And yet she also thought of the flickers, the fleeting glimpses of humanity in his gaze, the desperate way he had looked at her in Chicago, the raw confession in the cafe. It was too dangerous. This secret, if revealed, would bind her to him forever. And she didn't know if she was ready to surrender her freedom again. For weeks, Nora kept the secret close. She continued her work with Ethan Moore, smiling for the cameras, and speaking at conferences about clean beauty, while hiding the nausea that rose in the mornings, and the dizziness that came with exhaustion. She wrapped her body in looser dresses, and avoided questions with practiced ease. But Vincent was not blind. Though she avoided him, his eyes found her at every turn, at events in passing, even in her dreams. And he noticed. He noticed how her hands sometimes lingered at her stomach, the faint pallor of her skin, and how exhaustion weighed at her shoulders. Suspicion burned in him, but fear held him silent. It happened one evening when she collapsed outside a studio after a long shoot. Ethan caught her before she hit the ground, his arms steady around her. "We need to get you to a hospital," he said urgently. "No," she whispered, panic in her eyes. "No hospitals." But it was too late. Reporters had already captured the scene, the photos spreading like wildfire across headlines. Nora White collapses in Chicago. Ethan Moore rushes to aid. And among those who saw the headlines was Vincent Harris. He arrived at her apartment unannounced, fury and fear warring in his gaze. She opened the door reluctantly, her body weak, her hand instinctively pressing against her abdomen. "What's wrong with you?" he demanded, his voice harsh and panicked. Nothing, she said quickly, stepping back. Please don't lie to me, Nora. His eyes raked over her pale face, her trembling hands. You're sick. What is it? Her lips parted, but no words came. And in that silence, he saw how her hand lingered over her stomach, protective, instinctive. His chest tightened, his breath catching. You're pregnant. The word hung between them like thunder. Nora's eyes widened, tears brimming, her lips trembling. Vincent. He stepped closer, his voice breaking. It's mine. She turned away, unable to meet his gaze. Answer me, he begged, his hand reaching for her shoulder, trembling in a way she had never seen. Finally, she whispered, Yes. The world tilted. Vincent staggered back, his chest heaving. For a man who had built empires, who had crushed rivals without hesitation, this truth shattered him. He pressed his hand against his mouth, his eyes burning. My child, he whispered hoarsely. When he lifted his gaze to hers again, desperation burned there. Why didn't you tell me? Her voice cracked. Because I knew what you'd say. It was an inconvenience that ruined your empire, which I should eliminate. His face twisted with anguish. God, Nora, is that what you think of me? She turned sharply. Isn't it true? He closed his eyes, the weight of his past cruelty pressing against him. He remembered every cold word, every dismissal, every moment he had chosen Laya instead of her. He had given her no reason to believe otherwise, and now he was paying the price. Vincent stepped forward, his voice breaking. I would never ask you to give up our child. Never. She stared at him, disbelief etched across her face. I may have been blind, cruel, unforgivable. He continued, his hands trembling. But this is different. This is ours. Please don't shut me out of this, Nora. Please. Her eyes filled with tears, her heart torn. She had wanted to hear him beg to see him break, but now that he had, it hurt more than she had imagined. Vincent, she whispered, her voice shaking. You don't get to decide now. You don't get to want what you threw away suddenly. For the first time, Vincent Harris, the man who never bent, fell to his knees before her. I can't lose you, he whispered, his voice raw. Not you, not our child. I'll do anything, Nora, anything. The sight of him there, trembling undone, broke something inside her. She wanted to believe him. She tried to reach for him, but trust once shattered was not so easily rebuilt. She turned away, tears streaming silently down her face. Their lives became a fragile dance of unspoken truths in the following days. Vincent hovered near her, torn between fear and awe, desperate to protect her, but terrified of driving her further away. He accompanied her to doctor's appointments, sitting stiffly in the corner, his powerful hands clenching when he heard a faint heartbeat flutter on the monitor. The sound broke him. It rebuilt him. It remade him. Our child, he whispered afterwards, his voice trembling. But Nora remained distant, her heart a fortress. She could not forget the years of pain, the humiliation, the loneliness. She could not trust that this new Vincent, the man who knelt, trembled, whispered of fatherhood, was real. Ethan noticed the change too. He confronted Vincent outside Nora's building one evening. Ethan said coldly that she suddenly didn't need you to play the hero. You've hurt her enough. Vincent's jaw tightened. She's carrying my child. I won't abandon her. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Then prove it. Not with words, with actions. Otherwise, step aside and let her find peace. For once, Vincent didn't fire back. He stood there silent, his pride stripped away, his heart heavier than stone. That night, Vincent found Nora sitting on the balcony, her hand resting gently over her stomach. The city lights flickered below, but her eyes were distant. He approached slowly, his voice soft. "Do you hate me?" She turned to him, her gaze heavy with exhaustion. "I don't know what I feel anymore. Hate, love, fear. They've all blended." He swallowed hard. "Then let me spend whatever time I have proving I can be more. For you, for our child." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. Instead, she turned back to the skyline, the weight of the future pressing on her shoulders. And Vincent, standing beside her, knew this was only the beginning of his greatest battle, not for empires, not for wealth, but for the fragile trust of the woman carrying his child. The winter air in New York was sharp, slicing through the city with a bitter chill. Snow dusted the glass towers, but inside Harris Capitol, the heat of scandal blazed hotter than any fire. It began with a headline: "Exclusive, Vincent Harris. Spotted in Malibu with Lila Carter. Romantic getaway." The photo showed them on a terrace overlooking the Pacific. Lila's hand rested on Vincent's sleeve, her smile soft, his expression unreadable. Within hours, it was everywhere. News feeds, talk shows, society blogs. And with it came another blow. Nora White, Harris' wife, or forgotten past. Nora sat in her Chicago apartment, the newspaper trembling in her hands. The crimson letters screamed betrayal, though her heart whispered doubt. She had once seen Vincent in Malibu, but it was for business. A deal. Nothing more. Yet the photo told another story. And worse, the world believed it. Her phone buzzed relentlessly. Messages from journalists, cruel comments, online whispers asking if she was nothing more than a discarded wife carrying a child he never wanted. Her hand instinctively pressed against her stomach, shielding the fragile life within. Tears blurred her vision, but anger burned hotter. This was Lila. It had her fingerprints all over it. When Vincent arrived at her apartment that evening, his face was grim, his jaw tight. "You've seen it," he said quietly. "Yes," Nora replied, her voice like ice. "The whole world has. It's not what it looks like." She laughed bitterly. "Isn't that what people always say when it is precisely what it looks like?" His eyes flinched, but he stepped closer. "Nora, listen to me. That photo was staged. She set it up. Then why she demanded her voice breaking? Do you always make it so easy for her to use you?" Silence fell. He had no answer. The following week, Monroe Cosmetics launched an all-out campaign. Lila appeared on morning shows, her voice trembling with feigned vulnerability. "I've been vilified unfairly," she told the cameras, her green eyes glistening. "Nora has always misunderstood me. Vincent and we've been friends since childhood. He's supported me through everything. Surely that isn't a crime." Audiences sympathized, investors rallied, and whispers grew louder. Perhaps it was Nora who was unstable. Perhaps she clung to a man who never loved her. The dagger twisted deeper when Vincent was photographed again, leaving a restaurant where Lila had accidentally shown up. The world saw only betrayal. And Nora, alone in the shadows, felt the walls closing in. That night she sat by the fire, tears slipping silently down her face. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, calls from Ethan journalists and strangers who judged what they could never understand. Vincent entered quietly, but she didn't turn to him. "Say it," she whispered. "Say she's who you've wanted all along." His chest heaved. "No, it's you. It's always been you." Her laugh was hollow. If that were true, Vincent, would I still be standing here humiliated by her lies? For once, the man who commanded empires fell silent. But Nora was no longer the woman who endured in silence. She was no longer the ghost in his penthouse. Wiping her tears, she rose, her eyes dark with determination. "If she wants war," she whispered, "then she'll have it." Vincent frowned. "Nora, No, she cut him off. I'm done being the victim in her story. This time the truth will speak for itself. Days later, Nora stood before a crowded press hall. Cameras flashed microphones, thrust toward her reporters hungry for blood. She wore a simple black dress, her curls loose, her posture regal. The world expected a broken woman. Instead, they saw a queen. 3 weeks ago, she began her voice steady. I released independent lab reports, proving Monroe Cosmetics contained dangerous toxins. Rather than address these findings, Miss Carter has chosen to attack me personally, fabricating stories, staging photographs, and attempting to paint herself as a victim. Tonight, I present evidence that speaks louder than her lies. She lifted a folder. Inside were documents, emails, invoices, leaked reports from former Monroe employees, proof of concealed test results, proof of bribed regulators. Gasps filled the hall. And as for the photographs, Nora continued, her eyes flashing. The terrace in Malibu here is the original shot unedited. The man beside her was not Vincent Harris. He was a business partner who was cropped out to create a scandal. Miss Carter orchestrated the deception. She laid the photos on the podium, the evidence undeniable. The room erupted. Within hours, headlines shifted. Lila Carter. Exposed. Fabricated photos. Concealed reports. Nora White. Harris reveals truth. Monroe Cosmetics in freefall. Investors fled. Lawsuits mounted. Lila's empire crumbled overnight. For years, she had hidden behind wealth, beauty, and charm. Now, stripped of her lies, she stood alone. Her mask shattered, her career ruined. When Nora returned home that night, her body trembled with exhaustion, but her eyes gleamed with fire. She had faced the world and won, not with Vincent's protection, Ethan's support, but with her strength. Vincent was waiting, his gaze heavy with awe. "You were incredible," he whispered. She turned to him, her chin high. "I didn't do it for you, Vincent. I did it for me, for our child, for the truth." His chest ached at her words. Yet even as they cut, he felt something else, a reverence, a fear, a love he could no longer deny. But Lila Carter was not finished. 2 nights later, she appeared at the Harris penthouse, her eyes wild, her voice trembling. "Vincent, you can't abandon me," she pleaded, clutching his arm. "We've known each other our whole lives. Don't let her come between us." He pulled away, his voice ice. "You did that yourself." Her face twisted, desperation seeping through her perfect mask. "She'll ruin you. She'll take everything." His eyes darkened. "No, Lila. She's given me everything I never knew I needed. And you've already lost." For the first time, Lila Carter realized she could no longer control him. And the silence that followed was the sound of her empire collapsing. Later, Vincent found Nora standing on the balcony, the wind sweeping through her curls. He approached slowly, his voice low. "I watched you today, and I realized something." She turned, her eyes guarded. "What, that I've spent years protecting the wrong woman, defending the sinister truth. And in doing so, I almost lost the only one who mattered." Her lips trembled, but she said nothing. He stepped closer, his hand reaching, hesitating before resting gently against her stomach. "I don't deserve forgiveness," he whispered. "But I swear I will never let anyone hurt you again. Not Lila, not the world, not even me." Her eyes glistened, torn between the past's wounds and the future's fragile hope. And in that moment, under the cold winter sky, the war between them shifted. No longer husband and wife bound by silence, but 2 souls on the edge of something fragile, something terrifying. something real. Snow blanketed New York that night, falling in whispers over a city witnessing too much noise. Inside the Harris penthouse, the lights glowed warm against the cold, casting long shadows on marble floors that had once echoed with silence. But tonight, silence was broken. Vincent Harris, the man who once ruled with ice in his veins, now knelt on the floor before the woman he had almost lost forever. His tailored suit was wrinkled, his tie undone, his hair damp from melted snow. The world outside still saw him as untouchable, but here in front of Nora White, he was just a man, flawed, desperate, trembling. Nora. His voice broke raw and unsteady. I've destroyed everything that ever mattered. I've betrayed you, humiliated you, closed my eyes to what was right in front of me. But please don't let this be the end. Her chest ached as she looked down at him. He had begged before when he learned of the child, when jealousy consumed him, but never like this. Not with such truth in his eyes, not with such naked fear in his voice. Memories surged like waves. The nights she cried alone, staring at the empty side of the bed. The humiliations in glittering ballrooms, where whispers cut sharper than knives. The scandal Lila wove, and Vincent had once chosen silence instead of her. But also, the way his hands had trembled when he first heard their child's heartbeat. The way his voice broke when he said, "I'll do anything, Nora." He looked at her now as not an empire to protect, not as an obligation to bear, but as the only person who could save him from himself. She closed her eyes, torn between pain and longing. Vincent's voice shook every word. A confession years too late. I was a coward. I thought love was weakness. I thought distance would keep me safe. But you broke through everything. Your strength, fire, and refusal to be silenced. You are the only one who's ever seen me, truly seen me. And I can't. His voice cracked, his shoulders trembling. I can't imagine a life where you're not there. Her tears spilled silent trails down her cheeks. Vincent, she whispered, her voice fragile. Why now? Why only when you're about to lose me? He bowed his head, his forehead nearly touching her hand. Because I was blind until fear opened my eyes. Because I was a fool who thought I had time. And now I know time is the one thing I don't have if you walk away tonight. Her hand rested over her stomach, where the faint flutter of life reminded her of the future growing inside. The child deserved the truth. The child deserved love. But could she gamble on a man who had broken her so many times before? She looked at him broken on the floor and wondered if forgiveness was strength or surrender. Could she build a new life without him? Yes. Could she erase him from her heart? Never. And that truth terrified her most of all. Vincent lifted his gaze, eyes burning with a promise. I won't ask for your forgiveness overnight. I won't ask you to forget the years I hurt you. But give me the chance to be the man you and our child deserve. Let me earn for you. Let me prove that I can love you, not with words, but with every breath, every choice, every day I have left. The words hung heavy in the air. For once Nora saw no arrogance, no pride, only a man stripped bare, offering her his heart, like a fragile glass he feared she would shatter. She stepped back, her chest tight. Vincent, you've always had everything. Power, wealth, the world at your feet. Why is it me you beg for now? His lips trembled into a broken smile. Because the world means nothing if I lose the only woman who makes it worth having. Snow fell harder outside, coating the city in silence. Inside, time slowed. Nora's heart pounded, torn between rage and yearning, between the past and the possibility of tomorrow. She wanted to run, scream, and escape the gravity of his words. But she also wanted to believe that people could change, that love could rise from ruin. Finally, she spoke, her voice trembling but steady. "Vincent, I don't know if I can forgive you. I don't know if I can ever forget what you've done. But for our child, for myself, I will give you this one chance. One chance to prove that you are more than your mistakes." His breath caught his body trembling. "Nora." "One chance," she repeated firmly. "Break it, and I will walk away forever. No empire apology or desperate plea will bring me back this time." His eyes glistened, his voice breaking. "I won't fail you. I swear it." She allowed herself to collapse into his arms for the first time in years. His embrace was fierce, desperate, trembling with both fear and relief. He buried his face against her shoulder, inhaling her like oxygen, whispering again and again, "I won't lose you. I won't lose you." And though her heart was still fragile, though her wounds still ached, Nora held him back, not as a woman defeated, but as one who chose on her own terms to see if love could truly be reborn. Weeks later, the scandal had faded. Lila Carter's empire was ashes. Harris Capital had weathered the storm. But within the Harris penthouse, a new story began. Vincent attended every doctor's appointment, his large hand trembling each time he felt the flutter of life within her. He canceled meetings, cleared schedules, surprising everyone who had once thought him incapable of anything but work. Sometimes at night, Nora would catch him sitting beside her bed, watching her breathe, as if to reassure himself she was still there. And though she hadn't yet said the words he longed to hear, though forgiveness remained a road not yet traveled, hope lived between them again. Fragile, trembling, alive. Love does not always arrive as thunder. Sometimes it crawls back from ashes, fragile as snow, waiting to see if spring will come. Nora White and Vincent Harris stood at the edge of that fragile hope. Their story was not one of fairy tales, but of wounds, scars, and the courage to choose again. Only time would tell whether it would end in eternal love or final separation. But tonight, as snow fell over New York, they stood together not as prisoner and captor, not as strangers bound by obligation, but as two souls daring at last to begin again. And as we close this chapter of Nora and Vincent's turbulent love, I wonder, what would you choose if you were in her place? Would you forgive the man who broke you, or walk away and never look back? Share your thoughts below. And if their journey has moved you as much as it has me, remember to like, comment, and follow so you don't miss the next story, where love, pain, and redemption intertwine once more.